hopefully that gets some attraction, that gets some more involvement here. It's been really nice seeing one or two people get involved on the technical side, new this week, so that's excellent. And I think, that's one of the hardest things to find is technical support. Um, and yeah, so let me just write that in the Notion page for the Saphir to write up the 80-20 split. Okay. Yeah, I think probably two of the biggest things coming next would be one, I mean, if we really do want to continue doing voting as a full community, I think my suggestion would be to create a discourse. And the reason is that because in discourse, your admins can see IP addresses, so you can see when people make bots, make copies of themselves. Mostly, I mean, nothing's ever perfect. Then also you create levels, so you can say, hey, someone has to spend so much time before they can vote. They have to read threads, etc. I mean, and we're not making something insane to overcome something. It's pretty much like someone spends 30 minutes reading a post and writes a post, but what that does is it mitigates people just knocking out bots. I mean, Discord is great for discussion wise, but voting and not being able to fake profiles, it really is very easy to fake profiles. So what we'd have then is multiple voting, but something to think about. And I don't think we need to make a decision today since this means a little early. But another one was we've started to discuss about, do we want to put a cap on the airdrop to mitigate things like an exchange having an excessive amount of voting power, the IOTA Foundation having an excessive amount of voting power, or major whales like let's say David, who we know had, I don't know Shimmer, but had a lot of IOTA. Now I remember Saphir had brought up of a notion of just saying, what if we just cap the amount at 1 million, 1 TI, and I guess that would be IOTA and whatever that equivalent would be in Shimmer, so that the distribution isn't just so heavily weighted. And I know Edward brought this up once. I personally am not a fan of redistribution of wealth. However, I also look at the risk factor that if any one entity or organization or exchange has an immense amount of voting power, then it's not a fair governance at the end of the day. See, I would see Edward saying, to his mind, it's not so much about voting power, but more about an initial distribution of TAN. And see, I would look at it as absolutely voting power, because essentially what you're saying, the voting through governance is essentially just straight power. If you can sway a vote because you have the majority of tokens, then not only that, you can put a vote through and say, this happened. So right, we're trying to build a network built by the community and governed by the community, and not governed by a central authority. Yet if someone owns the majority of tokens, then they're going to have the majority of voting power. And essentially then you have a centralized network in this whole thing. So it's not just about a purchasing power, it's about a governance power. And Edward's typing, I would disagree, that's a redistribution of wealth. Everyone would keep their existing wealth of other tokens. This is a new token that has no obligation to follow the same contours of the existing distributions. Sure, but you're essentially then, I mean, again, I don't even think it's worth discussing, or, I wouldn't even say arguing, but just discussing about. But ultimately, we're setting rules to say, 90% of the people can have their tokens not adjusted. 10% of the people, we're going to adjust your tokens. But again, I'm not even looking at that aspect of it. It is a new system. I think that the key is, what is our vision, right? Like, what is the vision of this? What are we trying to build? And I think if we always keep that vision in mind, then every action should be looking to support that vision. Well, the vision is to create a network that is governed by the community and not governed by a central authority, whether that be an NGO, a board, three individuals, a single wallet holder that has an immense amount of voting power, etc. Right? Like that was the original vision of Shimmer, to be a community-controlled network with no barriers, so that essentially when the technical vision is agreed by the community, saying, hey, we want to keep the Tangle, and we want to keep the key aspects of data integrity across the network in a decentralized manner, that though 90% wants to go in one direction, 10% of the people or an organization or an NGO can't say, oh, we're going to completely change it. So all your work gets basically thrown to the side. And to maintain that, if that's the true vision, to have a network that governs themselves, then of course we have to limit the distribution in that sense to no major wallet. So again, the question then becomes, and I guess I should say, does anyone disagree that we should seek a way to blacklist or not drop TAN tokens to exchanges, centralized groups, etc.? And then the next question would be, if we all agree on that, what method can we do to do that? Blacklisted in the sense that they wouldn't receive TAN tokens. That's literally what you said 2 weeks ago. He says, I disagree that any address should be blacklisted unless it well established that it's a fraudster. My mic seems to only like working sometimes at this meeting. So I guess, I don't know, I guess I'm kind of confused. Are you saying then that you think the IF and exchanges should get TAN tokens? Well, I mean, I believe you said something like, these large addresses that are getting too many tokens, it's not fair to the distribution of the entire community, so that they should be capped in some way. But the only way to do that is to blacklist those. So maybe it's just a different terminology, and not saying that wallet, that address can never do anything in the future. It's just specifically saying for the airdrop, we would have to blacklist or whitelist, whatever you want to call it. We'd have to notate addresses that are not going to get the airdrop. And then Edward was typing, I don't believe I ever advocated for a blacklist, only for a tapering the quantity. Yes, some wallets have enormous balances. Well, blacklist would mean barred from participation. Yeah, that's exactly how I'm using the word blacklist, just to notate that they would not get tokens from an airdrop. Right. I mean, addresses, I know we're talking about grammar here. Like, yes, addresses would be singled out if they have too much. The question is, I mean, the real question is, do we want exchanges or large organizations that have massive addresses to get TAN or not? Yeah.
Let me try talking. Can everybody hear me?
Yep, I could hear you now.
Yes,
Great.
perfectly.
I think we're sort of talking past each other because I'm trying to type and you continue, and then we go back and forth a little bit. So let me just attempt with the microphone for a bit. What I suggested was simply a tapering out of the reward based on the balance of the IOTA or Shimmer in an address. That's all. Not working out who owns what accounts or excluding people any address that has above a certain balance. I wasn't suggesting any of that. All I was suggesting was a shallowing curve, right? Imagine a graph that has the balance on one side on the y-axis and the amount to airdrop to them on the x-axis, and it starts out steep and goes up to the right and tapers out. Never quite going level, but gets very close to level, so it tapers out. That's what I'm talking about. I don't know whether it's logarithmic or geometric. That's a formula that would have to be worked out, but the idea would be people with a low IOTA balance would get a higher higher ratio of TAN. They wouldn't get more TAN than someone with high balance, but they would get a higher ratio of IOTA to TAN or Shimmer to TAN. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not suggesting cutting anybody out. any addresses out. I'm not suggesting excluding anybody at all or any wallet, even wallets with very, very high balances. I'm just saying if it were linear, then whatever the current distribution of wealth is in IOTA and Shimmer would directly be directly mimicked on the TAN network, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
I think one would be, is that even possible? One question would be, is it even possible to create this sort of curve to figure out each individual address and then work that back into it?
Well, we already have the balances of every address that we're going to airdrop. So mathematically it's possible. Whether any one individual person is able to work that out is another question. But certainly it's possible to generate an algorithm that says, here is the value of TAN, or here's the percentage of TAN given to each address based on the percentage of the IOTA or Shimmer held by that wallet.
Yeah,
well, I mean, that sounds to me like it's a simple mathematics problem. When you're claiming it, surely it's referring to a database that says this is how many have been allocated to you based on your balance in the past. You wouldn't be able to do it based on current balance anyway. You'd have to do it based on previous balance, based on the spreadsheet. So as long as the spreadsheet's accessible by the code, then the calculation is already made before anybody starts making any claims.
Well, and the spreadsheet is, we just have to understand the spreadsheet. Again, that's what Jiggle was saying, like we would need the snapshot, which ultimately is going to be the same data, but we would need the snapshot for the address and that address balances.
I thought that's what was on the spreadsheet.
No, it's just an Excel file, but it's based off the snapshot, but it's not the snapshot itself. I will say this, I mean, I'm sure we could put stuff in it because, and I explain, and I only think this because when they did the Shimmer airdrop, it wasn't a 1-for-1 for IOTA, right? So somehow some dev was taking the snapshot and then putting some formula to say, okay, this is your equivalent in Shimmer. The same thing came with assembly tokens. So I would assume, and maybe that's a question, Garrett, you can ask your dev team is, do we have an ability to, let's say, cap it? Let's say, what are the two options that we can do to sort of regulate the airdrop in a fair sense? So it could be either, everyone gets airdropped tokens equally up to, 1 TI of IOTA and whatever that equivalent is in Shimmer. Or can we also, if possible, do some algorithmic curve, such as what Edward's saying, that, relatively everyone gets very similar TAN tokens?
Yeah, I have two questions here. So first, I don't understand what does it mean that it's an Excel, but it's not the real screenshot. Actually, the Excel is the screenshot. Actually, we made on that day amount of Shima token or IOTA token they have in their wallet. So that should be the snapshot, is it? Yeah. Yeah. Yes, it is. Actually, it's actually in the database, and ask the dev to make it into an Excel, which can be easier for me to, for other people also to check it out. Yeah. So this is supposed to be, that is the number one question. And number two, and so I actually I don't understand the point we want to make everyone getting the similar amount of 10 token